guys, my name is Tito and welcome to the first ever episode of my podcast. I'm just as surprised as those of you who know me are because I know I've told many of you, well, those of you who've asked me to start a podcast at some point, that I would never start a podcast. But alas, here we are. I'm doing not just a podcast, but a video podcast. If you're listening to this, just know that there's a video version of this podcast somewhere on YouTube. I encourage you to check that out as well and to subscribe there. But in this first introductory video, I will be talking about why I'm doing a podcast or why I decided to start a podcast. Secondly, I'll be talking about what I'm going to be discussing or covering or talking about on this podcast. Third, I will be talking, I'll explain, or what's the word now? I'll talk about who this podcast is going to be for. Yeah, the target audience. And finally, I will reveal what the name of this podcast is going to be. Yeah, so those are the four things that we're going to address in this inaugural episode of my podcast. Why I decided to start a podcast. Here are the reasons. First of all, I do YouTube videos. I do Nollywood reviews on YouTube, and they do well. I also put, all things considered, there are less than 2,000 subscribers on that channel. So when I say my videos get like 1,000 views. So do with that information what you will. So I do those videos. I also do Instagram Reels and TikToks every now and then. But I feel like there are diverse topics that I want to cover or treat or address, right? And I don't have the vehicle with the existing expressions to actually convey those messages or talk about those things, right? And I'll get more into that when I talk about what this podcast or the things I'm going to be discussing on this podcast are. But just know from what I'm saying is that I need a place to talk about diverse topics and the current expressions or boxes or platforms or things I've created, they're not conducive for that, right? So on YouTube, where this video is going to be, I will be able to talk about diverse things, right? So there's that. Secondly, time constraint. When I make my Instagram Reels and my YouTube movie reviews or my personal finance videos on my other YouTube channel or my relationship videos also on YouTube, I'm always worried about the attention span of you guys, the viewers, right? Because they say that you guys have a short attention span, and it's actually quite true. And so that makes me limit the things I say and cut down a lot or cut out a lot of the things I want to say in my videos. But with a podcast, it's the norm or it's the standard for conversations to be longer, right? And to be more in-depth and more expansive, so to speak. So with this podcast, I'll be able to address so many things the way I want to address them without cutting things out and trying to, make things compact and concise because I'm worried about the attention span of my viewer or my listener, right? So that's another reason why I'm doing this podcast. The third reason is because I want to improve my public speaking abilities. I noticed that when I'm invited to be on someone's TV show or somebody's radio show, I actually deliver live, right? I'm not too bad. But when I do my movie reviews, my Nollywood movie reviews on my own YouTube videos, I do several takes. And in editing, that's a headache. And even while filming, because it means that I spend a lot of time filming, but if I were able to just deliver in 1 or 2 takes, that would be beautiful. It would save me a lot of time in production, i.e. while filming, or in post-production while editing. So with this podcast, I'm hoping that I can be better at public speaking and getting my points across in just maybe 1 take or 2 takes at most. So that's the third thing that I want to achieve with this podcast. Finally, I want to open up, I should say, another income stream with this podcast. Podcasts, it's kind of tricky the way podcasts make money. I'm still researching it, and it's not as easy as it is, I think, for YouTube, from my understanding, right? But it is possible to earn money from podcasts, right? And I want to see how I can navigate that and use this to create more content, particularly for YouTube, so that I can earn more from there and through the other means that podcasts actually earn money. So I want to open up an additional income stream, essentially. So those are the 4 reasons why I'm doing a podcast now. And I hope you can appreciate that. I was a bit on the fence about revealing that last reason, i.e. the money one, but I've decided that I want to be upfront with you guys on this podcast. I want to share what's on my heart, tell you how things are doing me or how things are affecting me, and just to be upfront with you guys. And if me making money or attempting to make money with this podcast is a thing and it's something that matters a lot to me, I don't see why I should hide that from you. I can even take you along on the journey and let you know how that's faring in terms of if the money is coming in or not, or how the money is coming in. It's not clear. It's really a bit fuzzy right now, aside from the ad revenue that may come from views on YouTube if the episodes of the podcast do get lots of views. But I'm willing to explore and figure it all out, right? So those are the 4 reasons why I'm doing this podcast. Just a second, let me take a sip of water. Okay, like I said, we're live, one take. We're just going, no cuts. We're just rolling. So yes, that's the why. So what I will be discussing, treating, or talking about on this podcast. There'll be lots of reaction videos on this podcast. I'll be reacting to things that I see on, Instagram, right? I'll be reacting to videos that I watch on YouTube. I'll be reacting to sermons that I hear in church. There's so many things that I hear or see that I have opinions on, or whether it's if I want to agree or disagree with those things, but they're just things that I want to share. And I think this will be a good way to achieve that by reacting to several things that I see and hear online, or even in person or in real life, as the case may be. So reaction videos. Next, what else you'll get on this channel is topical and trending issues, things that happen in the news or that are happening in the world. If this podcast was a thing while Hilda Bassi was doing the whole Guinness Book of Records thing of trying to break the record of most hours or longest amount of time spent cooking, that would have been something that I may have treated as well. What else can you expect? Faith-based stuff. I am a man of faith, born again Christian, and we need more faith content out there. There's lots of faith content. There's sermons, there's posts on social media. There are great accounts on Instagram that are faith-based. There are also podcasts that are, Christian or faith-based, I should say, podcasts. But I feel like there could be more. There's no such thing as being too many or too much when it comes to, spreading the gospel or talking about things concerning faith. And that's not to say that this is a faith-based podcast, please. No, not necessarily. It's just that saying that that's something that's dear to me, and I do have opinions on things relating to faith. From time to time, I will be discussing those things. If it's not your cup of tea, it's fine. You don't need to listen to that particular episode or those episodes or watch them on YouTube. You can just wait for something else that is more your speed. So yeah, those are the 3 things: reaction videos, topical and trending issues, and faith-based content, and 1 or 2 other things here and there. My interests are quite varied, to be honest, and this podcast is really going to be about things that interest me at the end of the day, right? Although I will focus more on those reaction videos and the topical and trending issues and the faith-based stuff. Those may be the core things that I focus on the channel. So we've talked about the why. We've talked about what I'll be talking about and discussing on this podcast. And the next thing is who. Yeah, who is this podcast going to be for? I think it will be for people like me, i.e. millennials or entrepreneurs, or basically people of faith, perhaps, young people that I share things with or see life the way I see life, or people that just have like 30 minutes to spare to hear a young man talk about the things that are on his mind, the unique things that are on his mind, because the things that cross my mind sometimes and the views I have on certain things I feel are quite unique, but I guess everyone would say that their views on issues are unique. But I guess time will tell. When I start sharing my views on certain things, yeah, I guess we will decide, or you will be the one to judge how unique my views are. So yeah, that's the target audience: millennials, male and female, people who are willing to hear a young man speak for 30 minutes and share his opinions. And yeah, I wish this podcast would appeal to people in Gen Z, but people in Gen Z are they're built different, and I'm not sure I know how they work, or what, how their minds work and what goes through their minds. So I don't know if I can effectively target them, but I think I may be able to effectively target millennials. So yeah, that's who this podcast will be for. Finally, what this podcast is going to be called. Let's build some tension and anticipation while I sip my water. I don't know what this podcast is going to be called. I don't have a name for it. Well, I do have an idea. I have one name that I really like, but I don't want to share it just yet because I don't want anyone to steal it. And I have two other potential names or ideas. I can run them by you. The first one is It Is What It Is. The It Is What It Is podcast, right? Now, that name was a suggestion from somebody on Instagram. So there's another podcast I'm going to do, and I'm even more excited about that one. I'm going to do that one with my friend, and we've been talking about it. And I got on Instagram 2 weekends ago, and I did a Q&A thing. I asked people for potential names or ideas for a podcast that me and a friend and I will be hosting. And one of the suggestions was It Is What It Is. And I really liked that. And I took it to my friend who I'll be hosting this future podcast with. I told him, B, how about this name, right? And he was like, it doesn't really typify or explain what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. And he was right, to be honest. It Is What It Is doesn't really capture what our podcast is going to be about. But I still liked the name, right? So I thought, hey, why not use that name for this podcast? So for now, it's an idea. I'm not saying that's what I'm going to go with, but it's an idea. The downside is there's already a podcast called It Is What It Is. I think some guys in Ireland or Scotland, they have a podcast by that name. So I may need to modify the name if I decide to run with that one. Another idea for a name for this podcast could be the 30-minute podcast or the half-hour podcast. I quite like that because it's easy to remember. It tells you what you're getting into. You're getting into a 30-minute podcast. The problem is you put yourself in a box if you name your podcast with a name like that, because people will expect it to be 30 minutes bang on. But if it exceeds 30 minutes or if it's under 30 minutes, it may be an issue. But then again, it could at the end of the day just be a name. The podcast can be as long as it needs to be. But that name is catchy and it's easy to remember. Or those names are actually, because there is the 30-minute podcast or the half-hour podcast. I quite like those names, right? But like I said, it can be confining a bit. Yeah. So those are the ideas that I have for names for this podcast. Let me know what you think about them in the comment section down below. If you have any ideas of your own that you want to share in terms of a name for this podcast, you can share them with me in the comments of this video. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to this episode, I don't know, shoot me a DM on Instagram or on Twitter. My handle is at Eniola Tito. That's at ENIOLATITO. And yeah, let me know what idea you have for a name for this podcast. Okay. I believe I've said everything I wanted to say in this video. I did not intend for this video to exceed 15 minutes. I think I'm around 15 minutes right now if I'm checking the time properly. Thank you guys so much for watching this first ever episode of this yet to be named podcast. I'm excited. I'm also scared because YouTube I understand, but the world of podcasting I really don't. Even the call to action when you're ending a podcast, I know they say please rate this episode or rate this podcast and share the podcast. I'm not even sure what the call to actions are or calls to action are for a podcast. I have a lot to learn and I'm not excited about that. I'm taking on more work, but I think it will be worth it. I'm excited, like I said, And I'm really looking forward to all the things I'll be able to talk about now that I have more time to build on, thoughts and ideas that I have, and things I want to do. I have, more time to talk about those things at length, go in depth while you guys are making your breakfast or on the commute to work or just hanging out. Yeah, I'm excited, but the work and the editing and all that, Lord have mercy. God help me. Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast or watching this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please, if you are watching on YouTube, like the video by clicking on the like button and subscribe by hitting on the black subscribe button. You see, YouTube stuff, easy peasy. I know it like the back of my hand. Podcast stuff, anyway, I will master it with time. Thank you for the final time, guys. Rate this podcast, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. And leave me comments in the comment section down below, including a name, a potential name for this podcast. Thanks, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.